Chapter 5. The captain of the squad reined back his mount, removed his helmet, and used his fingers to comb his thinning hair, which was matted with sweat. "Journey's over," he repeated, seeing the troubadour's questioning gaze. "What? How do you mean?" said Dandelion, astonished. "Why?" "We aren't going any further. Do you see? The river you see glinting down there is the ribbon. We were only told to escort you to the ribbon. That means it's time we were off." The rest of the troops stopped behind them, but none of the soldiers dismounted. They were all looking around nervously. Dandelion shielded his eyes with a hand and stood up in the stirrups. "Where can you see that river?" "I said it's down there. Ride down the ravine and you'll be there in no time." "You could at least escort me to the bank," protested Dandelion, "and show me the ford. There's nothing much to show. Since May, the weather's been baking on, so the water level's dropped. There isn't much water in the ribbon. Your horse won't have any problem crossing it." "I showed your commander the letter from King Ventslav," said the troubadour, puffing up. "He read the contents, and I heard him order you to escort me to the very edge of Brokilon. And you're going to abandon me here in this thicket? What'll happen if I get lost?" "You won't get lost," muttered another soldier gloomily, who had come closer but had not so far spoken. "You won't have time to get lost. The Dryad's arrow will find you first." "What cowardly simpletons," Dandelion sneered. "I see you're afraid of the Dryads. But Brokilon only begins on the far bank of the ribbon." "The river is the border. We haven't crossed it yet." "Their border," explained the leader, looking around, "extends as far as their arrows do. A powerful bowshot from the bank will send an arrow right to the edge of the forest and still have enough impetus to pierce a hauberk. You insisted on going there. That's your business, it's your hide. But life is dear to me. I'm not going any further. I'd rather shove my head in a hornet's nest." "I've explained to you," said Dandelion, pushing his hat back and sitting up in the saddle, "that I'm riding to Brokilon on a mission. I am, it may be said, an ambassador. I do not fear Dryads, but I would like you to escort me to the bank of the ribbon. What'll happen if brigands rob me in that thicket?" The gloomy soldier laughed affectedly. "Brigands? Here, in daylight? You won't meet a soul here during the day. Latterly, the Dryads have been letting arrows fly at anyone who appears on the bank of the ribbon, and they're not above venturing deeper into our territory either. No need to be afraid of brigands." "That's true," agreed the captain. "A brigand would have to be pretty stupid to be riding along the ribbon during the day. And we're not idiots. You're riding alone, without armour or weapons, and you don't look, forgive me, anything like a fighting man. You can see that a mile off. That may favour you. But if those Dryads see us, on horseback and armed, you won't be able to see the sun for arrows." "Ah, well, there's nothing else for it." Dandelion patted his horse's neck and looked down towards the ravine. "I shall have to ride alone. Farewell, soldiers. Thank you for the escort." "Don't be in such a rush," said the gloomy soldier, looking up at the sky. "It'll be evening soon. Set off when the haze starts rising from the water, because you know—" "What?" "An arrow's not so sure in the fog. If fate smiles on you, the Dryads might miss. But they seldom miss." "I told you. All right, I've got it. You're going to them on some kind of mission. But I'll tell you something else. They don't care if it's a mission or a church procession. They'll let fly at you, and that's that." "You insist on frightening me, do you?" said the poet snootily. "What do you take me for, a court scribbler? I, my good men, have seen more battlegrounds than the lot of you, and I know more about Dryads than you, if only that they never fire without warning." "It once was thus, you're right," said the leader quietly. "Once they gave warnings. They shot an arrow into a tree trunk, or into the road, and that marked the border that you couldn't cross. If a fella turned back right then, he could get out in one piece. But now it's different. Now they shoot to kill at once." "Why such cruelty?" "Well," muttered the soldier, "it's like this. When the kings made a truce with Nilfgaard, they went after the elven gangs with a will. You can tell they're putting the screws on, but there isn't a night that survivors don't flee through Brugge, seeking shelter in Brokilon. And when our boys hunt the elves, they sometimes mix it with the Dryads too, those who come to the elves' aid from the far side of the ribbon, and our army has also been known to go too far. Get my drift?" "Yes," said Dandelion, looking at the soldier intently and shaking his head. When you were hunting the square tile, you crossed the ribbon, and you killed some dryads, and now the dryads are taking their revenge in the same way. It's war." "That it is. You took the words right out of me mouth. War, it was always a fight to kill, never to let live, but now it's worse than ever. There's a fierce hatred between them and us. I'll say it one more time. If you don't have to, don't go there." Dandelion swallowed. "The whole point," he said, sitting tall in the saddle and working hard to assume a resolute expression and strike a dashing pose, "is that I do have to. And I'm going. Right now. Evening or no evening, fog or no fog, duty calls." The years of practice paid off. The troubadour's voice sounded beautiful and menacing, austere and cold. It rang with iron and valour. The soldiers looked at him in unfeigned admiration. "Before you set off," said the leader, unfastening a flat wooden canteen from his saddle, "knack down some vodka, minstrel, sir. Have a good old swig. It'll make the dying easier," added the gloomy one morosely. The poet sipped from the canteen. "A coward," he declared with dignity, when he'd stopped coughing and had got his breath back, "dies 100 times. A brave man dies but once. But Dame Fortune favours the brave and holds cowards in contempt." The soldiers looked at him in even greater admiration. They didn't know, and couldn't have known, that Dandelion was quoting from a heroic epic poem, moreover, from one written by someone else. "I shall repay you for the escort with this," said the poet, removing a jingling leather pouch from his bosom. "Before you return to the fort, before you're once again embraced by strict mother duty, stop by at a tavern and drink my health." "Thank you, sir," said the leader, blushing somewhat. "You are generous, although we— Forgive us for leaving you alone, but—"
"It's nothing. Farewell."
The bard adjusted his hat to a jaunty angle over his left ear, prodded his horse with his heels, and headed into the ravine, whistling "The Wedding Party at Bullalin," a well-known and extremely indecent cavalry song. "The cornet in the fort said he was a freeloader, a coward and a knobhead, but he's a valiant military gentleman, even if he is a potaster." The voice of the gloomy soldier was carried to Dandelion's ears. "Truly spoken," responded the captain. "He isn't faint-hearted. You couldn't say that. He didn't even bat an eyelid, I noticed. And on top of that, he's whistling. Can you hear? Ho, ho. Heard what he said? That he's an ambassador? You can be sure they don't make any old bugger an ambassador. You got to have your head screwed on to be made an ambassador." Dandelion quickened his pace in order to get away as quickly as possible. He didn't want to sabotage the reputation he'd just earned himself, and he knew, with his mouth drying up in terror, that he wouldn't be able to whistle for much longer. The ravine was sombre and damp, and the wet clay and carpet of rotten leaves lying on it muffled the thudding of his dark bay gelding's hooves. He'd called the horse Pegasus. Pegasus walked slowly, head hanging down. He was one of those rare specimens of horse who could never care less. The forest had come to an end, but a wide, reedy meadow still separated Dandelion from the banks of the river, which was marked by a belt of alders. The poet reined Pegasus in. He looked around carefully, but didn't see anything. He listened out intently, but only heard the singing of frogs. "Well, boy," he croaked, "it's do or die. Gee up." Pegasus lifted his head a little and stuck up his ears, which normally hung down questioningly. "You heard right. Off you go." The gelding set off reluctantly, the boggy ground squelching beneath his hooves. Frogs fled with long hops. A duck took flight a few paces in front of them, fluttering and quacking, briefly stopping the troubadour's heart, after which it began pounding very hard and very rapidly. Pegasus showed no interest in the duck whatsoever. "The hero rode," mumbled Dandelion, wiping the cold sweat from the nape of his neck with a handkerchief taken from inside his jerkin, "rode fearlessly through the wilderness, heedless of the leaping lizards and flying dragons. He rode and rode until he reached a vast expanse of water." Pegasus snorted and stopped. They were by the river, among reeds and bulrushes, which stood taller than his stirrups. Dandelion wiped his sweaty forehead and tied the handkerchief around his neck. He had been staring at the alder thicket on the far bank until his eyes watered. he saw nothing and no one. The surface of the water rippled from waterweed being swayed by the current, while overhead turquoise and orange kingfishers flitted past. The air twinkled with swarming insects. Fish gulped down mayflies, leaving huge rings on the surface of the water. Everywhere, as far as the eye could see, there were beaver lodges, piles of cut branches, and felled and gnawed tree trunks being washed by the lazy current. "There's an astonishing abundance of beavers here," thought the poet, "and no small wonder. No one bothers these bloody tree chewers. Neither robbers, hunters, nor forest beekeepers venture into this region. Not even those interfering fur trappers would dare set their snares here. The ones who tried would have got an arrow through the throat, and the crayfish would have nibbled on them in the ooze by the river-bank. And I, the idiot, am forcing my way out here of my own free will. Here, by the ribbon, over which hangs a cadaverous stench, a stench which even the scent of sweet flag and mint cannot mask." He sighed heavily. Pegasus slowly planted his forelegs into the water, lowered his muzzle towards the surface, drank long, and then turned his head and looked at Dandelion. The water dripped from his muzzle and nostrils. The poet nodded, sighed once more, and sniffed loudly. "The hero gazed on the maelstrom," he quietly declaimed, trying not to let his teeth chatter. "He gazed on it, and travelled on, for his heart knew not trepidation." Pegasus lowered his head and ears. "Knew not trepidation, I said." Pegasus shook his head, jingling the rings on his reins and bit. Dandelion dug a heel into his side. The gelding entered the water with pompous resignation. The ribbon was shallow but very overgrown. Before they had reached the centre of the current, Pegasus was dragging long plats of waterweed. The horse walked slowly and with effort, trying to shake the annoying pondweed off with every step. The rushes and alders of the far bank were close, so close that Dandelion felt his stomach sinking low, very low, right down to the saddle itself. He knew that in the centre of the river, entangled in the waterweed, he was an excellent target, a sitting duck. In his mind's eye, he could already see bows bending, bowstrings being pulled back, and sharp arrowheads being aimed at him. He squeezed the horse's sides with his calves, but Pegasus was having none of it. Instead of picking up speed, he stopped and lifted his tail. Balls of dung splashed into the water. Dandelion gave a long groan. "The hero," he muttered, closing his eyes, "was unable to cross the raging rapids. He fell in action, pierced by many missiles. He was hidden for ages, long in the azure depths, rocked by jade-green algae. All traces of him vanished. Only horse shit remained, borne by the current to the distant sea." Pegasus, clearly relieved, headed jauntily towards the bank without any encouragement, and when he reached the bank and was finally free of waterweed, even took the liberty of breaking into a canter, utterly soaking Dandelion's trousers and boots. The poet didn't notice it, though, since the vision of arrows aimed at his belly hadn't left him for a moment, and dread crept down his neck and back like a huge, cold, slimy leech. For beyond the alders, less than 100 paces away, beyond the vivid green band of riverside grass, rose up a vertical, black, menacing wall of trees. It was Brokilon. On the bank, a few steps downstream, lay the white skeleton of a horse. Nettles and bulrushes had grown through its ribcage. Some other, smaller bones, which didn't come from a horse, were also lying there. Dandelion shuddered and looked away. Squelching and splashing, the gelding, urged on by Dandelion, hauled himself out of the riverside swamp, the mud smelling unpleasantly. The frogs stopped croaking for a moment. It all went very quiet. Dandelion closed his eyes. He stopped declaiming and improvising. His inspiration and daring had evaporated. Only cold, revolting fear remained. An intense sensation, but one utterly bereft of creative impulses. Pegasus perked up his floppy ears and dispassionately shambled towards the forest of the Dryads, called by many the Forest of Death. "I've crossed the border," thought the poet.
Now it will all be settled. While I was by the river and in the water, they could be magnanimous. But not now. Now I am an intruder. Just like that one. I might end up a skeleton too. A warning for people to heed. If there are dryads here at all. If they're watching me.
He recalled watching shooting tournaments, competitions and archery displays at country markets. Straw targets and mannequins studded or torn apart by arrowheads.
What does a man feel when he's hit by an arrow? The impact? Pain? Or perhaps nothing?
There were either no dryads nearby, or they hadn't made up their minds what to do with this lone rider, because the poet rode up to the forest, petrified with fear, but in one piece. Entry to the trees was barred by a dense tangle of scrub and fallen trunks, bristling with roots and branches. But in any case, Dandelion didn't have the slightest intention of riding up to the very edge, much less of heading deeper into the forest. He was capable of making himself take risks, but not of committing suicide. He dismounted very slowly and fastened the reins to a protruding root. He didn't usually do that. Pegasus wasn't inclined to wander away from his master. Dandelion was not certain, however, how the horse would react to the whistle and whir of arrows. Up until now, he had tried not to expose either Pegasus or himself to sounds of that kind. He removed a lute from the saddle's pommel. It was a unique, magnificent instrument with a slender neck. This was a present from a she-elf, he recalled, stroking the inlaid wood. It might end up returning to the elder folk. Unless the dryads leave it by my dead body. Close by lay an old tree, blown down in a gale. The poet sat down on the trunk, rested the lute on his knee, licked his lips, and wiped his sweaty hands on his trousers. The day was drawing to a close. A haze rose from the ribbon, forming a grey-white shroud enveloping the meadows. It was cooler now. The honking of cranes sounded and died away, leaving only the croaking of frogs. Dandelion plucked the strings. Once, then twice, then a third time. He twisted the pegs, tuned the lute, and began to play, and a moment later, to sing.
Ivis me veljen ventekel mentel, Ilain et Ariel, eb cor melod daithes fiel. In blathque me darien, en mine ven tegen a me, in toin av mjörden, quid disevich aefle.
The sun vanished behind the trees. It immediately became dark in the shade of Brokilon's mighty trees.
Oes an lam, fain renesel, Elaine et Ariel, eb cor.
He didn't hear, but he felt somebody's presence.
Temire, detre, scente vorth. Don't shoot,
he whispered, obediently not looking around.
Ne espa a me. I come in peace. Niesater, sciente.
He obeyed, although his fingers had turned cold and numb on the strings, and he had difficulty making any sound whatsoever emerge from his throat. But there was no hostility in the dryad's voice, and he was a professional, damn it.
Oes an lam, fain renesel, Elaine et Ariel, eb cor entedd deviel erwen, in blat que me darien, es yin evelien a me, que scient te calm avien mine mestrixie.
This time, he took the liberty of glancing over his shoulder. Whatever was crouching by the tree trunk, very near, resembled a bush entwined in ivy. But it wasn't a bush. Bushes didn't have such large, shining eyes. Pegasus snorted softly, and Dandelion knew that behind him in the darkness Someone was stroking his horse's muzzle.
"Sé inte vårt,"
requested the Dryad, squatting behind him once again. Her voice was like the pattering of rain on leaves. He began.
I am the comrade of the Witcher, Geralt. I know that Geralt, that Gwynblythe, is among you in Brokilon. I have come nite chichen. She ain't,
gently asked a second Dryad from behind him, virtually in unison with a third, and maybe a fourth. He couldn't be certain.
Ye, she ain't dear,
said the thing that a moment earlier the poet had taken to be a birch sapling, standing a few paces in front of him, in a silvery, girlish voice.
Eslaina, dead. Sing some more about Ithariel.
Yes. He did as she asked.
To adore you is all my life, fair Ithariel. Let me keep, then, the treasure of memories and the magical flower, a pledge and sign of your love, silvered by drops of dew as if by tears.
This time he heard steps approaching. Dandelion.
Geralt?
Yes, it's me. You can stop that racket now. How did you find me? How did you know I was in Brokilon?
Triss Merigold. Bloody hell,
said Dandelion. He tripped again and would have fallen, had a passing Dryad not seized him in a dexterous and astonishingly powerful grip for one so slight.
Garia, dead,
she warned in silvery tones.
Vakilm. Thank you. It's awfully dark here. Geralt? Where are you?
Here. Don't lag behind.
Dandelion quickened his pace, stumbled once more, and almost fell on the Witcher, who had stopped in the dark in front of him. The Dryads passed by them silently. It's hellishly dark. Is it much further?
No. We'll soon be at the camp. Who apart from Triss knows I'm hiding here? Did you let it slip to anyone?
I had to tell King Wenslav I needed safe conduct through Brugge. He wouldn't believe the times we live in. I also had to have permission for the expedition to Brokilon. But anyway, Wenslav knows you and likes you. He appointed me an envoy. Just imagine. I'm sure he'll keep it secret. I asked him to. Don't get annoyed now, Geralt.
The Witcher came closer. Dandelion couldn't see the expression on his face, only the white hair and bristles of several days' beard growth, which was visible even in the dark. I'm not annoyed, said the Witcher, placing his hand on Dandelion's shoulder. It seemed as though his voice, which up until then had been cold, was somewhat changed. I'm glad you're here, you whoreson.
It's so cold here,
said Dandelion, shuddering and making the branches they were sitting on creak under him.
We could get a fire going.
Don't even think about it, muttered the Witcher. Have you forgotten where you are?
Are you serious?
The troubadour glanced around timidly.
Oh, no fire, right?
Trees hate fire, and they do too.
Damn it! Are we going to sit here and freeze? And in the bloody dark? I can't see my hand in front of my face.
Keep it by your side, then. Dandelion sighed, hunched forward and rubbed his arms. He heard the Witcher beside him breaking some thin twigs in his fingers. A small green light suddenly flared up in the dark, first of all dim and faint, then quickly becoming brighter. After the first one, many others began to glimmer around them, moving and dancing like fireflies or will-o'-the-wisps above a marsh. The forest suddenly came to life with a shimmering of shadows, and Dandelion began to see the silhouettes of the Dryads surrounding them. One of them approached and put something on the ground near them, which looked like a hot, glowing tangle of plants. The poet reached a hand out carefully and took hold of it. The green glow was totally cold.
What is it, Geralt?
Rotten wood and a special kind of moss. It only grows here in Brokilon, and only they know how to weave it all together to make it give off light. Thank you, Falve. The Dryad did not answer, but neither did she go away, remaining squatting alongside the pair. She had a garland on her brow, and her long hair fell to her shoulders. Her hair looked green in the light, and may actually have been green. Dandelion knew that Dryad's hair could be the weirdest colours. "Taed," she said melodically, raising her flashing eyes to the troubadour. Her fine-featured face was crossed diagonally by two parallel dark stripes of painted camouflage. "Es vi vort siente in Italia? Siente je bien vort?" "No, later, perhaps," he answered politely, carefully searching for words in the elder speech. The Dryad sighed and leaned over, gently stroking the neck of the lute which was lying nearby. She rose nimbly to her feet. Dandelion watched her as she disappeared into the forest towards the others, whose shadows showed faintly in the dim light of the small green lanterns. "I trust I didn't offend her, did I?" he asked softly. "They have their own dialect, and I don't know polite expressions." "Check whether you've got a knife in your guts," said the Witcher, with neither mockery nor humour in his voice. "Dryads react to insults by sticking a knife in your belly. Don't worry, Dandelion. I'd say they're willing to forgive you a good deal more than slips of the tongue. The concert you gave at the edge of the forest was clearly to their liking. Now you're Ard Teird, the great bard. They're waiting for the next part of the Flower of Itariel. Do you know the rest? It's not your ballad after all."
"It's my translation. I also embellished it somewhat with elven music. Didn't you notice?"
"No."
"As I thought. Fortunately, Dryads are more receptive to art. I read somewhere that they're exceptionally musical, which is why I came up with my cunning plan, for which, incidentally, you haven't yet praised me."
"My congratulations," said the Witcher after a moment's silence. "It was indeed cunning, and fortune smiled on you, as usual. They shoot accurately at 200 paces. They don't usually wait until someone crosses onto their bank of the river and begins to sing. They are very sensitive to unpleasant smells, so when the corpse falls into the river and gets carried away by the current, they don't have to put up with the stench."
"Oh, whatever," said the poet,
clearing his throat and swallowing.
"The most important thing is I pulled it off and found you. Geralt, how did you—
Do you have a razor?"
"Huh? Well, of course I do."
"Lend it to me tomorrow morning. This beard of mine is driving me insane."
"Didn't the Dryads have any?" "I guess not. They don't have much need for them, do they? Of course I'll lend it to you." "Geralt."
"What?"
"I don't have any grub with me. Should Ard Teird, the great bard, hold out any hopes of supper when visiting Dryads?"
"They don't eat supper. Never. And the guards on Brokilon's border don't eat breakfast either. You'll have to survive until noon. I've already got used to it."
"But when we get to their capital, the famous Duin Canel, concealed in the very heart of the forest—"
"We'll never get there, Dandelion."
"What? I thought— But you— I mean, they've given you sanctuary. After all, they tolerate—"
"You've chosen the right word." They both said nothing for a long time.
"War," said the poet finally. "War. Hatred and contempt. Everywhere. In everyone's hearts."
"You're being poetic."
"But that's what it's like."
"Precisely. Right. Tell me your news. Tell me what's been happening in the world while they've been tending to me here."
"First," said Dandelion, coughing softly, "tell me what really happened in Garstang."
"Didn't Triss tell you?"
Yes, she did, but I'd like to hear your version."
"If you know Triss's version, you know a more complete and probably more faithful version already. Tell me what's happened since I've been here."
"Geralt," whispered Dandelion, "I don't know what happened to Yennefer and Ciri. No one does. Triss doesn't either."
The Witcher shifted suddenly, making the branches creak. "Did I ask you about Ciri or Yennefer?" he said in a different voice. "Tell me about the war."
"Don't you know anything? Hasn't any news reached you here?"
"Yes, it has, but I want to hear everything from you. Speak, please."
"The Nilfgaardians," began the bard after a moment's silence, attacked Lyria and Aedirn, without declaring war. The reason was supposedly an attack by Demavend's forces on some border fort in Dol Angra, which happened during the Mages' Conclave on Thaneth. Some people say it was a setup, that they were Nilfgaardians disguised as Demavend's soldiers. We'll probably never find out what really happened. In any case, Nilfgaard's retaliation was swift and overwhelming. The border was crossed by a powerful army which must have been concentrated in Dol Angra for weeks, if not months. Spala and Scala, the two Lyrian border strongholds, were captured right away, in just 3 days. Rivia was prepared for a siege lasting months, but capitulated after 2 days under the pressure of the guilds and the merchants, who were promised that, should the town open its gates and pay a ransom, it wouldn't be sacked.
Was the promise kept?
Yes.
Interesting.
The Witcher's voice changed again a little.
Promises being kept in these times. I won't mention that in the past no one would have dreamed of making promises like that, because no one would have expected them. Craftsmen and merchants never opened the gates of strongholds, they defended them. Each guild had its own tower or machinations.
Money has no fatherland, Geralt. The merchants don't care whose rule they make their money under, and the Nilfgaardian Palatine doesn't care who he levies taxes on. Dead merchants don't make money or pay taxes.
Go on.
After the capitulation of Rivia, the Nilfgaardian army headed northwards at great speed, almost without encountering any resistance. The armies of Demavend and Meve withdrew, unable to form a front in the deciding battle. The Nilfgaardians reached Aldersburg. In order to prevent the stronghold being blockaded, Demavend and Meve decided to join battle. The positions of their armies could have been better.
Bucker it, if there were more light here, I'd draw you. Don't draw anything, and keep it brief. Who won?
Have you heard, sir? Said a reeve, out of breath and sweating, pushing through the group gathered around the table. A messenger has arrived from the field. We have triumphed. The battle is won. Victory. It is our day. Our day. We have vanquished our foe. We have beaten him into the ground.
Silence, scowled Evertson. My head is splitting from your cries. Yes, I've heard. We vanquished the foe. It is our day. It is our field, and it is also our victory. What a sensation!
The bailiffs and reeves fell silent, and looked at their superior in astonishment. Do you not rejoice, Chamberlain, sir?
That I do, but I'm able to do it quietly.
The reeves were silent, and looked at one another.
Young pups, thought Evertson. Overexcited young whippersnappers. Actually, I'm not surprised at them. But for heaven's sake, there on the hill, even Menocoehorn and Ilantrahe, forsooth, even the grizzly-bearded General Braibat, are yelling, jumping for joy and slapping each other's backs in congratulation. Victory! It is our day. But who else's day could it have been? The kingdoms of Aedirn and Lyria only managed to mobilize 3,000 horse and 10,000 foot, of which 1/5 had already been blockaded in the first days of the invasion, cut off in its forts and strongholds. Part of the remaining army had to withdraw to protect its flanks, threatened by far-reaching raids by light horse and diversionary strikes by units of Scoia'tael. The remaining 5,000 or 6,000, including no more than 1,200 knights, joined battle on the fields outside Aldersburg. Coehorn sent an army of 13,000 to attack them, including 10 armed companies, the flower of the Nilfgaard knighthood. And now he's overjoyed. He's yelling, he's thwacking his mace against his thigh and calling for beer. Victory! What a sensation! With a sudden movement, he gathered together the maps and papers lying on the table, lifted his head and looked around. Listen carefully, he said brusquely to the reeves. I shall be issuing instructions. His subordinates froze in anticipation. Each one of you, he began, heard Field Marshal Coehorn's speech yesterday to his officers. I would like to point out, gentlemen, that what the Marshal said to his men does not apply to you. You are to execute other assignments and orders. My orders. Evertson pondered for a moment and wiped his forehead. War to the castles. Peace to the villages, Coehorn said to his commanders yesterday. You know that principle, he added at once. You learned it in officer training. That principle applied until today. From tomorrow you're to forget it. From tomorrow a different principle applies, which will now be the battle cry of the war we are waging. The battle cry, and my orders run: war on everything alive. War on everything that can burn. You are to leave scorched earth behind you. From tomorrow we take war beyond the line we will withdraw behind after signing the treaty. We are withdrawing, but there is to be nothing but scorched earth beyond that line. The kingdoms of Rivia and Aedirn are to be reduced to ashes. Remember Sodden? The time of revenge is with us. Evertson cleared his throat loudly. Before the soldiers leave the earth scorched behind them, he said to the listening reeves, your task will be to remove from that earth and that land everything you can, anything that may increase the riches of our fatherland. You, Audagast, will be responsible for loading and transporting all harvested and stored crops. Whatever is still in the fields and what Coehorn's gallant knights don't destroy is to be taken. I have too few men, Chamberlain, sir. There will be enough slaves. Put them to work. Madar and you. I've forgotten your name. Helvet. Ivan Helvet, Chamberlain, sir. You'll be responsible for livestock. Gather it into herds and drive it to the designated points for quarantine. Beware of rotfoot and other diseases. Slaughter any sick or suspected specimens and burn the carcasses. Drive the rest south along the designated routes. Yes, sir. And now a special task, thought Evertson, scrutinizing his subordinates. To whom shall I entrust it? They are all striplings, milk still wet on their cheeks. They've seen little, they've experienced nothing. I miss those old hardened bailiffs of mine. Wars, wars, always wars. Soldiers are always falling and in great numbers, but the losses among bailiffs, even though much fewer in number, are more telling. You don't see the deficit among the active troops because fresh recruits always keep replacing them, for every man wants to be a soldier. But who wants to be a bailiff or a reeve? Who, when asked by their sons on returning home what they did during the war, wants to say he measured bushels of grain, counted stinking pelts, and weighed wax as he led a convoy of carts laden with spoils along rutted roads, covered in ox shit, and drove herds of lowing and bleating beasts, swallowing dust and flies and breathing in the stench? A special mission. The foundry in Gullet, with its huge furnaces. The puddling furnaces, the zinc ore foundry, and the huge ironworks in Eisenlahn. Annual production of 500 hundredweight. The foundries and wool manufactories in Aldersburg, the maltings, distilleries, weaving mills, and dye works in Wengerberg. Dismantle and remove. Thus ordered Emperor Emir, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies. As simple as that. Dismantle and remove, Evertson. An order's an order. It must be carried out. That leaves the most important things, the ore mines and their yield. Coinage, valuables, works of art. But I'll take care of that myself, in person. Alongside the black columns of smoke which were visible on the horizon rose other plumes, and yet others. The army was implementing Coehorn's orders. The kingdom of Aedirn had become a land of fires. A long column of siege engines trundled along the road, rumbling and throwing up clouds of dust, towards Aldersburg, which was still holding out, and towards Wengerberg, King Demoven's capital. Peter Evertson looked and counted and calculated, and added up the money. Peter Evertson was the Grand Chamberlain of the Empire, during the war the army's chief bailiff. He had held that position for 25 years. Figures and calculations, they were his life. A mangonel costs 500 florins, a trebuchet 200, an onager at least 150, the simplest ballista 80. A trained crew requires 9.5 florins of monthly pay. The column heading for Wengerberg, including horses, oxen, and minor tackle, is worth at least 300 marks. 60 florins can be struck from a mark of pure ore weighing half a pound. The annual yield of a mine is 5,000 or 6,000 marks. The siege column was overtaken by some light cavalry. Evertson recognized them as the Duke of Winneberg's tactical company, one of those redeployed from Sintra by the designs on its pennants. Yes, he thought, they have something to be pleased about. The battle won, the army from Aedion routed. Reserves will not be deployed in a heavy battle against the regular army. They will be pursuing forces in retreat, wiping out scattered, leaderless groups. They will murder, pillage, and burn. They're pleased because it promises to be a pleasant, jolly little war. A little war that isn't exhausting and doesn't leave you dead. Evertson was calculating. The tactical company combines 10 ordinary companies and numbers 2,000 horse, although the Winneburgians will probably not take part in any large battles now. No fewer than a sixth of their number will fall in skirmishes. Then there will be camps and bivouacs, rotten victuals, filth, lice, mosquitoes, contaminated water. Then the inevitable will come. Typhus, dysentery, and malaria, which will kill no fewer than a quarter. To that you should include an estimate for unpredictable occurrences, usually around 1/5 of the total. 800 will return home. No more, and probably far fewer. Cavalry companies continued to pass along the road, and infantry corps followed the cavalry. These, in turn, were followed by marching longbowmen in yellow jerkins and round helmets, crossbowmen in flat kettle hats, pavisiers and pikemen. Beyond them marched shield-bearers, veterans from Viovaro and Etolia, armoured like crabs, then a colourful hodgepodge, hirelings from Mettina, mercenaries from Thurn, Mecht, Gesso and Ebbing. The troops marched briskly in spite of the intense heat, and the dust stirred up by their heavy boots billowed above the road. Drums pounded, pennants fluttered, and the blades of pikes, lances, halberds and guisarmes swayed and glittered. The soldiers marched jauntily and cheerfully. This was a victorious army, an undefeated army. Onward, lads, forward into battle, on Vengerberg, destroy our foe, avenge Sodden, enjoy this merry little war, stuff our money bags with loot, and then home. And then home. Evertson watched and calculated.
Vengerberg fell after a week-long siege, finished Dandelion. It may surprise you, but the guilds courageously defended their towers and the sections of wall assigned to them until the very end, so the entire garrison and all the townspeople were slaughtered. It must have been around 6,000 people. When news of it got out, a great flight began. Defeated regiments and civilians began to flee to Temeria and Redania en masse. Crowds of fugitives headed along the Pontar Valley and the passes of Mahakam, but not all of them managed to escape. Mounted Nilfgaardian troops followed them and cut off their escape. You know what I'm driving at.
No, I don't. I don't know much about war, Dandelion.
I'm talking about captives, about slaves. They wanted to take as many prisoners as possible. It's the cheapest form of labour for Nilfgaard. That's why they pursued the fugitives so doggedly. It was a huge manhunt, Geralt. Easy pickings, because the army had run away and no one was left to defend the fleeing civilians.
No one.
Almost no one.
We won't make it in time,
Phyllis wheezed, looking around.
We won't get away. Oh, damn it, the border is so close. So close.
Rayla stood up in her stirrups and looked at the road winding among the forested hills. The road, as far as the eye could see, was strewn with people's abandoned belongings, dead horses and with wagons and handcarts pushed to the side of the road. Behind them, beyond the forests, black columns of smoke rose into the sky. Screams and the intensifying sounds of battle could be heard ever closer.
They're wiping out the rear guard.
Villis wiped the soot and sweat from his face.
Can you hear it, Rayla? They're caught up with the rear guard, and they're putting them to the sword. We'll never make it.
We are the rear guard now, said the mercenary dryly. Now it's our turn.
Villis blenched, and one of the soldiers standing close by gave a loud sigh. Rayla tugged at the reins and turned around her mount, which was snorting loudly and barely able to lift its head.
There's no chance of our getting away, she said calmly. The horses are ready to drop. They'll catch up with us and slaughter us before we make it to the pass.
Let's dump everything and hide among the trees, said Willis, not looking at her. Individually, every man for himself. Maybe some of us will manage to survive.
Rayla didn't answer, but indicated the mountain pass with a glance and a wave of her head, then the road and the rearmost ranks of the long column of refugees trudging towards the border. Willis understood. He cursed bitterly, leapt from his saddle, staggered and leaned on his sword.
Dismount, he yelled to the soldiers hoarsely. Block the road with anything you can. What are you staring at? Your mother bore you once, and you only die once. We're the army. We're the rear guard. We have to hold back our pursuers, delay them.
He fell silent.
Should we delay the pursuers, the people will manage to cross into Temeria, to cross the mountains,
ended Rayla, also dismounting.
There are women and children among them. What are you gawping at? It's our trade. This is what we're paid for, remember?
The soldiers looked at one another. For a moment, Rayla thought they would actually run away, that they would rouse their wet and exhausted horses for a last, desperate effort, that they would race past the column of fugitives towards the pass and safety. She was wrong. She had misjudged them. They upset a cart on the road. They quickly built a barricade, a makeshift barricade, not very high and absolutely ineffectual. They didn't have to wait long. 2 horses, snorting and stumbling, lurched into the ravine, strewing flecks of froth around. Only one of them bore a rider.
Blaze! Ready yourselves!
The mercenary slid from the saddle into a soldier's arms.
Ready yourselves! Damn it! They're right behind me!
The horse snorted, skittered a few paces sideways, fell back on its haunches, collapsed heavily on its side, kicked, stretched its neck out, and uttered a long neigh.
Rayla,
wheezed Blaze, looking away.
Give me something. I've lost my sword.
Rayla, looking at the smoke from fires rising into the sky, gestured with her head to an axe leaning against the overturned cart. Blaze seized the weapon and staggered. The left leg of his trousers was soaked in blood.
What about the others, Blaze?
They were slaughtered, the mercenary groaned. Every last man. The entire troop. Rayla, it's not Nilfgaard. It's the squirrels. It was the elves who overhauled us. The Scoia'tael are in front, ahead of the Nilfgaardians.
One of the soldiers wailed piercingly, and another sat down heavily on the ground, burying his face in his hands. Willis cursed, tightening the strap of his cuirass.
To your positions!
Yelled Rayla.
Behind the barricade! They won't take us alive, I swear to you!
Willis spat, then tore the 3-coloured, black, gold, and red rosette of King Demoven's special forces from his spalder, throwing it into the bushes. Rayla, cleaning and polishing her own badge, smiled wryly.
I don't know if that will help, Willis. I don't know. You promised, Rayla. I did, and I'll keep my promise. To your positions, boys! Grab your crossbows and longbows!
They didn't have to wait long. After they had repelled the first wave, there were only 6 of them left alive. The battle was short but fierce. The soldiers, mobilized from Vengerberg, fought like devils and were every bit as savage as the mercenaries. Not one of them fell into the hands of the Scoia'tael alive. They chose to die fighting. And they died, shot through by arrows, died from the blows of lance and sword. Blaze died lying down, stabbed by the daggers of 2 elves who pounced on him, dragging him from the barricade. Neither of the elves got up again. Blaze had a dagger too. The Scoia'tael gave them no respite. A second group charged. Willis, stabbed with a lance for the 3rd time, fell to the ground.
Rayla!
He screamed indistinctly.
You promised!
The mercenary, dispatching another elf, swung around.
Farewell, Willis,
she said, placing the point of her sword beneath his sternum and pushing hard.
See you in hell.
A moment later, she stood alone. The Scoia'tael encircled her from all sides. The soldier, smeared with blood from head to foot, raised her sword, whirled around and shook her black plait. She stood among the elves, terrible and hunched like a demon. the elves retreated.
"Come on!"
she screamed savagely.
"What are you waiting for? You will not take me alive! I am Black Rayla!"
"Gleidje vort, Bianna," responded a beautiful, fair-haired elf in a calm voice. He had the face of a cherub and the large cornflower-blue eyes of a child. He had emerged from the surrounding group of Scoia'tael, who were still hanging back hesitantly. His snow-white horse snorted, tossed its head powerfully up and down, and energetically pawed at the blood-stained sand of the road. "Gleidje vort, Bianna," repeated the rider. "Throw down your sword, woman." The mercenary laughed horribly and wiped her face with her cuff, smearing sweat mixed with dust and blood.
"My sword costs too much to be thrown away, elf," she cried. "If you want to take it, you will have to break my fingers. I am Black Rayla. What are you waiting for?"
She did not have to wait long. "Did no one come to relieve Aedion?" asked the Witcher after a long pause. "I understood there were alliances, agreements about mutual aid, treaties."
"Redania,"
said Dandelion, clearing his throat,
"is in disarray after Visimir's death.
Did you know King Visimir was murdered?" "Yes, I did."
Queen Hedvig has assumed power, but bedlam has broken out across the land, and terror. Scoia'tael and Nilfgaardian spies are being hunted. Dijkstra raged through the entire country. The scaffolds were running with blood. Dijkstra is still unable to walk, so he's being carried in a sedan chair.
"I can imagine it. Did he come after you?"
No, he could have, but he didn't. Oh, but never mind. In any case, Redania, plunged into chaos itself, was incapable of raising an army to support Aedion.
"And Temeria? Why didn't King Foltest of Temeria help Demavend?"
"When the fighting began in Dol Angra," said Dandelion softly, Emir var Emrys sent an envoy to Vitsima.
"Blast!"
hissed Bronnibor, staring at the closed doors.
"What are they spending so long debating? Why did Foltest debate himself so to enter negotiations? Why did he give an audience to that Nilfgaardian dog at all? He ought to have been executed and his head sent back to Emir in a sack."
"By the gods, Voivode," choked the priest Vilima. "He is an envoy, don't forget. An envoy's person is sacrosanct and inviolable. It is unfitting."
"Unfitting? I'll tell you what's unfitting. It is unfitting to stand idly by and watch as the invader wreaks havoc in countries we are allied to. Lyria has already fallen, and Aedion is falling. Demavend will not hold Nilfgaard off by himself. We ought to dispatch an expeditionary force to Aedion immediately. We ought to relieve Demavend with an assault on the Yaruga's left bank. There are few forces there. Most of the regiments have been redeployed to Dol Angra, and we're standing here debating. We're yapping instead of fighting. And on top of that, we are playing host to a Nilfgaardian envoy."
"Quite, Voivode," said Duke Herivard of Elender, giving the old warrior a scolding look. "This is politics. You have to be able to look a little further than a horse's muzzle and a lance. The envoy must be heard. Emperor Emhyr had reason to send him here."
"Of course he had reason," snarled Bronnibor. "Right now, Emhyr is crushing Aedion and knows that if we cross the border, bringing Redania and Kaedwen with us, we'll defeat him and throw him back beyond Dol Angra to Ebbing. He knows that were we to attack Sintra, we'd strike him in his soft underbelly and force him to fight on two fronts. That is what he fears. So he's trying to intimidate us, to stop us from intervening. This is the mission the Nilfgaardian envoy came here with, and no other."
"Then we ought to hear out the envoy," repeated the Duke, "and take a decision in keeping with the interests of our kingdom. Demavend unwisely provoked Nilfgaard and has suffered the consequences, and I'm in no hurry to die for Vengerberg. What is happening in Aedion is no concern of ours."
"Not our concern? What by 100 devils are you drivelling on about? You consider it other people's business that the Nilfgaardians are in Aedion and Lyria on the right bank of the Yaruga when only Mahakam separates us from them? You don't have an ounce of common sense."
"Enough of this feuding," warned Vilima. "Not another word. The king is coming out."
The chamber doors opened. The members of the Royal Council rose, scraping their chairs. Many of the seats were vacant. The Crown Hetman and most of the commanders were with their regiments, in the Pontar Valley, in Mahakam, and by the Yaruga. The chairs, which were usually occupied by sorcerers, were also vacant. Sorcerers? Yes, thought Vilimar the priest. The places occupied by sorcerers here at the royal court in Vitsima will remain vacant for a long time. Who knows? Perhaps forever. King Foltest crossed the hall quickly and stood by his throne, but did not sit down. He simply leaned over, resting his fists on the table. He was very pale. Vengerberg is under siege, said the King of Temeria softly, and will fall any day now. Nilfgaard is pushing northwards relentlessly. The surrounded troops continue to fight, but that will change nothing. Aedion is lost. King Demavend has fled to Redania. The fate of Queen Meve is unknown. The council was silent. In a few days, the Nilfgaardians will take our eastern border, by which I mean the mouth of the Pontar Valley. Foltest went on, still very softly. Haga, Aedion's last fortress, will not withstand them for long, and Haga is on our eastern border. And on our southern border, something very unfortunate has occurred. King Ervil of Verden has sworn fealty to Emperor Emhyr. He has surrendered and opened the strongholds at the mouth of the Yaruga. Nilfgaardian garrisons are already installed in Nastrog, Rotsrog, and Bodrog, which were supposed to have protected our flank. The council was silent. Owing to that, continued Foltest, Ervil has retained his royal title, but Emhyr is his sovereign. Verden remains a kingdom, but de facto is now a Nilfgaardian province. Do you understand what that means? The situation has turned about face. The Verdanian strongholds and the mouth of the Yaruga are in Nilfgaard's hands. I cannot attempt to cross the river, and I cannot weaken the army stationed there by forming a corps which could enter Aedion and support Demavend's forces. I cannot do that. Responsibility for my country and my subjects rests on me. The council was silent. Emperor Emhyr var Emrys, the Imperator of Nilfgaard, said the king, has offered me a proposition. An agreement. I have accepted that proposition. I shall now present this proposition to you, and you, when you have heard me out, will understand, will agree that, will say. The council was silent. You will say, concluded Foltest. You will say, I am bringing you peace. So Foltest crumbled, muttered the Witcher, breaking another twig in his fingers. He struck a deal with Nilfgaard. He left Aedion to its fate. Yes, agreed the poet. However, he sent his army to the Pontar Valley, and occupied and manned the stronghold at Haga. And the Nilfgaardians didn't march into the Mahakam Pass, or cross the Yaruga in Sodden. They didn't attack Brugge, which, after its capitulation and Ervil's fealty, they have in their clutches. That was, without doubt, the price of Temeria's neutrality. Ciri was right, whispered the Witcher. Neutrality. Neutrality is always contemptible. What? Nothing. But what about Caedwyn, Dandelion? Why didn't Henselt of Kaedwen come to Demavend and Meade's aid? They had a pact, after all. They were bound by an alliance. But even if Henselt, following Foltest's example, pisses on the signatures and seals on documents, and the royal word means nothing to him, he cannot be stupid, can he? Doesn't he understand that after the fall of Aedirn and the deal with Temeria, it will be his turn, that he's next on the Nilfgaardian list? Kaedwen ought to support Demavend out of good sense. There may no longer be faith nor truth in the world, but surely good sense still exists. What say you, Dandelion? Is there still good sense in the world, or do only contemptibility and contempt remain? Dandelion turned his head away. The green lanterns were close. They were surrounding them in a tight ring. He hadn't noticed it earlier, but now he understood. All the Dryads had been listening in to his story. "You say nothing," said Geralt. "Which means that Ciri was right, that Codring was right, you were all right. Only I, the naive, anachronistic and stupid Witcher, was wrong." Centurion Daigod, known by the nickname Half-Gallon, opened the tent flap and entered, panting heavily and snarling angrily. The Decurions jumped to their feet, assuming military poses and expressions. Zyvik dexterously threw a sheepskin over the small barrel of vodka standing among the saddles, before the eyes of the Centurion had time to adjust to the gloom. Not to save themselves from punishment, because Daigod wasn't actually a fervent opponent of drinking on duty or in the camp, but more in order to save the barrel. The Centurion's nickname had not come about by accident. The story went that, in favourable conditions, he was capable of knocking back half a gallon of hooch, vigorously and with impressive speed. The Centurion could polish off a standard soldier's quart mug as if it were a gill in one draught, and seldom got his ears wet doing it. "Well, Centurion, sir?" asked Bode, the bowman's decurion. "What have the top brass decided? What are our orders? Are we crossing the border? Tell us." "Just a moment," grunted Half-Gallon. "What bloody heat! I'll tell you everything in a moment. But first, give me something to drink, because my throat's bone dry, and don't tell me you haven't got any. I can smell the vodka in this tent a mile off, and I know where it's coming from under that there sheepskin." Zyvik muttered an oath, took out the barrel. The Decurions crowded together in a tight group, and clinked cups and tin mugs. "Ah," said the Centurion, wiping his whiskers and eyes. "Whoa, that's foul stuff. Keep pouring, Zyvik." "Come on, tell us quickly," said Bode, becoming impatient. "What orders? Are we marching on the Nilfgaardians, or are we going to hang around on the border like a bunch of spare pricks at a wedding?" "Itching for a scrap?" Half-Gallon wheezed lengthily, spat and sat down hard on a saddle. "In a hurry to get over the border towards Aedirn? You can't wait, eh? What fierce wolf cubs you are, doing nothing but standing there growling, baring your fangs." "That's right," said old Starla coldly, shuffling from one foot to the other. His legs were as crooked as a spider's, which befitted an old cavalryman. "That's right, Centurion, sir. This is the 5th night we've slept in our boots, so they're ready, and we want to know what's happening. Is it a scrap, or back to the fort?" "We're crossing the border," announced Half-Gallon brusquely. "Tomorrow at dawn. 5 brigades with the Dun banner leading the way. And now pay attention, because I'm going to tell you what was told to us centurions and warrant officers by the Voivode and the Honourable Margrave Mansfield of Ardcarr, who'd come straight from the king. Prick up your ears, because I won't tell you twice, and they're unusual orders." The tent fell silent. "The Nilfgaardians have passed through Dol Angra," said the Centurion. "They crushed Lyria and reached Aldersburg in 4 days, where they routed Demavend's army in a decisive battle. Right away, after only 6 days' siege, they took Vengerberg by means of treachery. Now, they're heading swiftly northwards, driving the armies back from Aedirn towards the Pontar Valley and Dol Blathanar. They're heading towards us, towards Kaedwen. So, the orders for the Dun banner are as follows. Cross the border and march hard south, straight for the Valley of the Flowers. We have 3 days to get to the River Dyfna. I repeat, 3 days, which means we'll be marching at a trot. And, when we get there, not a step across the Dyfna, not a single step. Shortly after, the Nilfgaardians will show up on the far bank. We do not, heed my words well, engage them. In no way. Understood? Even if they try to cross the river, we're only to show them our colours. That it's us, the Caedwin army. Although it seemed impossible, the silence in the tent grew even more palpable. "What?" mumbled Bode finally. "We aren't to fight the Nilfgaardians. Are we going to war or not? What's this all about, Centurion, sir?" "That's our orders. We aren't going to war, but—" Halfgallon scratched his neck. "But to give fraternal help. We're crossing the border to give protection to the people of Upper Aedirn. Wait, what am I saying? Not from Aedirn, but from Lormark. That's what the Honourable Margrave Mansfield said. Yes, and he said that Demavend has suffered a defeat. He's tripped up and is lying flat on his face because he governed poorly and his politics were crap. So that's the end of him, and the end of the whole of Aedirn with him. Our king lent Demavend a pretty penny because he gave him help. One cannot allow wealth like that to be lost, so now it's time to get that money back with interest. Neither can we let our compatriots and brothers from Lormark be taken prisoner by Nilfgaard. We have to, liberate them. For those are our ancient lands, Lormark. They were once under Caedwin rule, and now they shall return to its rule, all the way to the river Dyfne. That's the agreement our Grace, King Henselt, has concluded with Emir of Nilfgaard. Agreements or no agreements, the Dun Banner is to station itself by the river. Do you understand?" No one answered. Halfgallon grimaced and waved a hand. "Ah, sod the lot of you. You don't understood shit, I see. But don't worry yourselves, because I didn't either. For His Majesty the King, the Margraves, the Voivodes and Nobles are there to think. And we're the army. We have to follow orders. Get to the river Dyfne in 3 days, stop there and stand like a wall, and that's it. Poor Zyvik."
"Centurion, sir," stammered Zyvik. "And what will happen? What will happen if the army of Aedirn resists, or bars the road? After all, we're passing through their country armed. What then?"
"Should our compatriots and brothers," continued Stala spitefully, "the ones we're supposedly liberating, should they begin to shoot arrows at us or throw stones, eh? We are to be on the banks of the Dyfne in 3 days, said Halfgallon forcefully, and no later. Whoever tries to delay or stop us is clearly an enemy, and our enemies can be cut to ribbons. But heed my words well. Listen to the orders. Burn no villages nor cottages. Take no goods from anyone. Do not plunder. Rape no women. Make sure you and your men remember this, for should anyone break this order, they will hang. The Voivode must have repeated this 10 times. We aren't fucking invading. We're coming to give a helping hand. Why are you grinning, Staller? It's a bloody order. Now get to your units on the double. Get 'em all on their feet. The horses and tack are to shine like the full moon. In the afternoon, all companies are to fall in for inspection. The Voivode himself will be drilling them. If I have to be ashamed of one of the platoons, the Decurion will remember me. Oh yes, he'll remember. You have your orders.
Zyvik was the last to leave the tent. Squinting in the bright sunlight, he watched the commotion which had taken over the camp. Decurions were rushing to their units. Centurions were running about and cursing, and noblemen, cornets, and pages were getting under each other's feet. The heavy cavalry from Banard was trotting around the field, stirring up clouds of dust. The heat was horrendous. Zyvik quickened his pace. He passed 4 bards from Ardkara, who had arrived the previous day, and were sitting in the shadow cast by the Margrave's richly decorated tent. The bards were just composing a ballad about the victorious military operation, about the prowess of the king, the prudence of the commanders, and the bravery of the humble foot soldier. As usual, to save time, they were doing it before the operation. "Our brothers greeted us, they greeted us with bread and salt," sang one of the bards, trying out his lyrics. "They greeted their saviours and liberators, they greeted them with bread and salt." "Hey, Raffia, think up a clever rhyme for salt." The second bard suggested a rhyme. Zyvik did not hear what it was.
The platoon, camped among some willows by a pond, leapt up on seeing him.
"Make ready!"
roared Zyvik, standing a good way back, so that the smell of his breath would not influence the morale of his subordinates.
"Before the sun rises, another 4 fingers, there'll be a full inspection. Everything's to be shining like the sun. Arms, tack, trappings, and your mounts. There will be an inspection. And if I have to be ashamed of one of you before the centurion, I'll tear that soldier's legs off. Look lively."
"We're going into battle," guessed Cavalryman Kraska, tucking his shirt quickly into his trousers.
"Are we going into battle, Decurion, sir? What do you think? Or maybe we're off to a dance to a Lammas party? We're crossing the frontier. The entire Dun banner sets off tomorrow at dawn. The centurion didn't say in what array, but we know our platoon will be leading as usual. Now, look lively, move your asses. Hold on, come back. I'll say this right now, because there'll be no time later. It won't be a typical little war, lads. The honourable gentlemen have thought up some modern idiocy. Some kind of liberation or some such. We aren't going to fight the enemy, but we're heading towards our... what was it? Eternal lands, to bring, fraternal help. Now pay attention to what I say. You're not to touch the folk of Aedirn, not to loot. What? Said Kraska, mouth agape. What do you mean, don't loot? And what are we going to feed our horses on, Decurion, sir? You can loot fodder for the horses, but nothing else. Don't cut anyone up, don't burn any cottages down, don't destroy any crops. Shut your trap, Krasker. This isn't a village gathering, it's the fucking army. Carry out the orders or you hang. I said, don't kill, don't murder, and don't... Zyvik broke off and pondered. And if you rape any women, do it on the quiet, out of sight, he finished a moment later.
They shook hands, finished Dandelion. On the bridge on the River Dyfne, Margrave Mansfield of Ardcara and Menno Coehorn, the commander-in-chief of the Nilfgaardian armies from Dol Angra. They shook hands over the bleeding, dying kingdom of Aedirn, sealing a criminal division of the spoils. The most despicable gesture history has ever known. Geralt remained silent. "On the subject of despicableness," he said surprisingly calmly a moment later. "What about the sorcerers, Dandelion? The ones from the chapter and the council?" "Not one of them remained with Demavend," began the poet soon after. "While Foltest drove all those who had served him out of Temeria, Philippa is in Traitorgore, helping Queen Hedvig to bring the chaos reigning in Redania under control. With her is Triss and 3 others, whose names I can't recall. Several of them are in Kaedwen. Many of them escaped to Kovir and Hengfors. They chose neutrality, because Esterad Thyssen and Niedemir, as you know, were and are neutral." "I know. What about Vilgefortz and the people who stuck by him?" "Vilgefortz has disappeared. It was expected he would surface in Aedirn after its capture as Emir's viceroy. But there's no trace of him. Neither of him nor any of his accomplices, apart from—" "Go on, Dandelion." "Apart from one sorceress, who has become a queen." Filavandrel eb Fiddail waited for the answer in silence. The queen, who was staring out of the window, was also silent. The window looked out onto the gardens, which, not so long ago, had been the pride and delight of the previous ruler of Dol Blatana, the governor of the despot from Vengerberg. Fleeing before the arrival of the free elves, who were coming in the vanguard of Emperor Emir's army, the human governor had managed to take most of the valuables from the ancient elven palace, and even some of the furniture, but he could not take the gardens, so he destroyed them. "No, Filavandre," said the queen finally. "It is too early for that, much too early. Let us not think about extending our borders, for at present we are not even certain of their exact positions. Henselt of Kaedwen has no intention of abiding by the agreement and withdrawing from the Dyfne. Our spies inform us he has by no means abandoned his thoughts of aggression. He may attack us any day." "So we have achieved nothing." The queen slowly held out a hand. An Apollo butterfly, which had flown in through the window, alighted on her lace cuff, folding and unfolding its pointed wings.
"We've achieved more," said the Queen softly, in order not to frighten away the butterfly, "than we could have hoped for. We have finally recovered our Valley of the Flowers after 100 years.
I would not name it thus. Filavandrel smiled sadly. Now, after the armies have passed through, it should be called the Valley of the Ashes.
We have our own country once more, finished the Queen, looking at the butterfly. We are a people again, no longer outcasts, and the ash will nourish the soil. In spring the valley will blossom anew.
That is too little, Daisy. It is ever too little. We've come down a station or two. Not long ago, we boasted we would push the humans back to the sea whence they came, and now we have narrowed our borders and ambitions to Dol Blatan.
Emir Dydwen gave us Dol Blatan as a gift. What do you expect from me, Filavandrel? Am I to demand more? Do not forget that even in receiving gifts there should be moderation, particularly when it concerns gifts from Emir, because he gives nothing for nothing. We must keep the lands he gave us, and the powers at our disposal are barely sufficient to retain Dol Blatana.
Let us withdraw, then, our commandos from Temeria, Redania, and Kaedwen, suggested the white-haired elf. Let us withdraw all Scoia'tael forces who are fighting the humans. You are now queen, Enid, and they will obey your orders. Now that we have our own small scrap of land, there is no sense in their continuing to fight. Their duty is to return and defend the Valley of the Flowers. Let them fight as a free people in defense of their own borders. Right now, they are falling like bandits in the forests.
The elf bowed her head. Emir has not permitted that, she whispered. The commandos are to fight on.
Why? To what end? Said Filavandrel ep Fiddael, sitting up abruptly.
I will say more. We are not to support nor to help the Scoia'tael. This was the condition set by Foltest and Henselt. Temeria and Kaedwen will respect our rule in Dol Blatana, but only if we officially condemn the squirrels' aggression and distance ourselves from them.
Those children are dying, Daisy. They are dying every day, perishing in an unequal contest. As a direct result of these secret pacts with Emir, humans will attack the commandos and crush them. They are our children, our future, our blood. And you tell me we should dissociate ourselves from them. Que seien me dicete Enid? Forsake Echlan, Ian Vine? The butterfly took flight, flapping its wings, and flew towards the window, then spun around, caught by currents of hot summer air. Francesca Findebaer, known as Enid and Leanna, once a sorceress and presently the queen of Aenshi, the free elves, raised her head. Tears glistened in her beautiful blue eyes.
The commandos, she repeated softly, must continue to fight. They must disrupt the human kingdoms and hinder their preparations for war. That is the order of Emir, and I may not oppose Emir. Forgive me, Filavandrel.
Filavandrel ep Fiddael looked at her and bowed low. I forgive you, Enid, but I do not know if they will. Did not one sorcerer think the matter over a second time? Even when Nilfgaard was slaughtering and burning in Aedirn, did none of them abandon Vilgefortz or join Philippa? Not one. Geralt was silent for a long time. I can't believe, he said finally, very softly. I can't believe none of them left Vilgefortz when the real causes and effects of his treachery came to light. I am, as is generally known, a naive, stupid and anachronistic witcher. But I still cannot believe that the conscience of not one sorcerer was pricked. Tissaia de Vries penned her practised, decorative signature beneath the final sentence of the letter. After lengthy reflection, she also added an ideogram signifying her true name alongside. A name no one knew. A name she had not used for a very long time, not since she became an enchantress. Skylark. She put her pen down very carefully, very precisely, across the sheet of parchment. For a long while she sat motionless, staring at the red orb of the setting sun. Then she stood up and walked over to the window. For some time she looked at the roofs of houses in which ordinary people were at that moment going to bed, tired by their ordinary human lives and hardship, full of ordinary human anxiety about their fates, about tomorrow. The enchantress glanced at the letter lying on the table, at the letter addressed to ordinary people. The fact that most ordinary people couldn't read was of no significance. She stood in front of the looking-glass. She straightened her hair. She smoothed her dress. She brushed a non-existent speck from her puffed sleeve. She straightened the ruby necklace on her breast. The candlesticks beneath the looking-glass stood unevenly. Her servant must have moved them while she was cleaning. Her servant. An ordinary woman. An ordinary human with eyes full of fear about what was happening. An ordinary human, adrift in these times of contempt. An ordinary human searching in her, in an enchantress, for hope and certainty about tomorrow. An ordinary human whose trust she had betrayed. The sound of steps, the pounding of heavy soldiers' boots, drifted up from the street. Tissaia de Vries did not even twitch, did not even turn to face the window. It was unimportant to her whose steps they were. Royal soldiers? A provost with orders to arrest the traitress? Hired assassins? Vilgefortz's hitmen? She could not care less. The steps faded into the distance. The candlesticks beneath the looking-glass stood out of kilter. The enchantress straightened them and corrected the position of a tablecloth so that its corner was exactly in the centre, symmetrically aligned with the candlestick's quadrangular bases. She unfastened the gold bracelets from her wrists and placed them perfectly evenly on the smoothed cloth. She examined the tablecloth critically, but could not find the tiniest fault. Everything was lying evenly and neatly, as it should have lain before. She opened the drawer in the dresser and took out a short knife with a bone handle. Her face was proud and fixed, expressionless. It was quiet in the house, so quiet the sound of a wilted petal falling on the tabletop could be heard. The sun, as red as blood, slowly sank below the roofs of the houses. Tissaia de Vries sat down on the chair by the table, blew out a candle, straightened the quill lying across the letter one more time, and severed the arteries in both wrists. The fatigue caused by the day-long journey had made itself felt. Dandelion awoke and realized he had probably fallen asleep during the story, dropping off in mid-sentence. He shifted and almost rolled off the pile of branches. Geralt was no longer lying alongside him to balance the makeshift bed. "Where did I—" he said, coughing. He sat up. "Where did I get to? The sorcerers. Geralt? Where are you?" "Here," said the Witcher, barely visible in the gloom. "Go on, please. You were just going to tell me about Yennefer." "Listen," said the poet, knowing perfectly well he'd had absolutely no intention of even mentioning the person in question. "I really know nothing." "Don't lie. I know you." "If you know me so well," said the troubadour, beginning to bristle, "why the bloody hell are you making me speak? Since you know me through and through, you ought to know why I'm keeping my counsel, why I'm not repeating the gossip I've heard. You also ought to be able to guess what the gossip is and why I want to spare you it." "Cosette," said one of the dryads, sleeping nearby, on being woken by his raised voice. "I beg your pardon," said the Witcher softly. Almost all of the green lanterns of Brochelon were out. Only a few of them still glimmered gently. "Geralt," said Dandelion, interrupting the silence. You've always maintained that you don't get involved, that nothing matters to you. She may have believed that. She believed that when she began this game with Vilgefortz.
Enough, said Geralt.
Not another word. When I hear the word game, I feel like killing someone. Oh, give me that razor. I want to have that shave at last. Now? It's still dark.
It's never too dark for me. I'm a freak.
After the Witcher had snatched the pouch of toiletries from him and headed off towards the stream, Dandelion realized he had shaken off all drowsiness. The sky was already lightening with the promise of dawn. He got up and walked into the forest, carefully stepping over the dryads who were sleeping cuddled together. Are you one of those who had a hand in this? He turned around suddenly. The dryad leaning against a pine tree had hair the colour of silver, visible even in the half-light of the dawn. A most deplorable sight, she said, folding her arms across her chest. Someone who has lost everything. You know, minstrel, it is interesting. Once, I thought it was impossible to lose everything, that something always remains, always, even in times of contempt, when naivety is capable of backfiring in the cruelest way. One cannot lose everything. But he lost several pints of blood, the ability to walk properly, the partial use of his left hand, his witcher's sword, the woman he loves, the daughter he had gained by a miracle, his faith. Well, I thought he must have been left with something. But I was wrong. He has nothing now, not even a razor. Dandelion remained silent. The dryad did not move. I asked if you had a hand in this, she began a moment later. But I think there was no need. It's obvious you had a hand in it. It's obvious you are his friend. And if someone has friends and he loses everything in spite of that, it's obvious the friends are to blame for what they did or for what they didn't do. What could I have done? He whispered. What could I have done? I don't know, answered the dryad. I didn't tell him everything. I know. I'm not guilty of anything. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. He jumped to his feet, making the branches of his makeshift bed creak. Geralt sat beside him, rubbing his face. He smelled of soap. Aren't you? He asked coolly. I wonder what else you dreamed about. That you're a frog? Calm down. You aren't. Did you dream that you're a chump? Well, that dream might have been prophetic. Dandelion looked all around. They were completely alone in the clearing. Where is she? Where are they? On the edge of the forest. Get ready. It's time you left. Geralt, I spoke with a dryad a moment ago. She was talking in the common speech, without an accent, and told me none of the dryads in that group spoke the common speech without an accent. You dreamed it, Dandelion. This is Brokilon. Many things can be dreamed here. A lone dryad was waiting for them at the edge of the forest. Dandelion recognized her at once. It was the one with the greenish hair who had brought them light during the night and encouraged him to continue singing. The dryad raised a hand, instructing them to stop. In her other hand, she was holding a bow with an arrow nocked. The Witcher put his hand on the troubadour's shoulder and squeezed it hard. Is something going on? Whispered Dandelion. Indeed. Be quiet and don't move. The dense fog, hanging over the Ribbon Valley, stifled voices and sounds, but not so much that Dandelion was unable to hear the splash of water and the snorting of horses. Riders were crossing the river. Elves, he guessed. Scoia'tael? They're fleeing to Brokilon, aren't they? An entire commando unit? No, muttered Geralt, staring into the fog. The poet knew the Witcher's eyesight and hearing were incredibly acute and sensitive, but he was unable to guess if his assessment was based on vision or hearing. It isn't a commando unit. It's what's left of one. 5 or 6 riders, 3 riderless horses. Stay here, Dandelion. I'm going over there. Garian, said the green-haired dryad in warning, raising her bow. Niva, gwenai de blade, Kirin. This et fave, replied the Witcher unexpectedly brusquely. Miss Barqui Varanilea. Go ahead and shoot. If not, lock me up and don't try to frighten me, because there's nothing you can frighten me with. I must talk to Milva Baring, and I will do so whether you like it or not. Stay there, Dandelion. The Dryad lowered her head, her bow too. 9 horses emerged from the fog, and Dandelion saw that indeed only 6 of them were bearing riders. He saw the shapes of dryads emerging from the undergrowth and heading to meet them. He noticed that 3 riders had to be helped to dismount and had to be supported in order to walk towards the trees of Brokilon and safety. The other dryads stole like wraiths across the hillside, which was covered with wind-fallen trees, and vanished into the fog hanging above the ribbon. A shout, the neighing of horses, and the splash of water came from the opposite bank. It also seemed to the poet that he could hear the whistle of arrows, but he was not certain. They were being pursued, he muttered. Falve turned around, gripping her bow.
You sing a song, Daith, she snapped. In the shame, I mean. Not about it, Ariel. No, my darling. The time is not right. Now it is time to kill, yes. Such a song, yes.
He stammered. I'm not to blame for what is happening.
The Dryad was silent for a moment, and looked to one side.
Also, not I,
she said, and quickly disappeared into the undergrowth. The Witcher was back before an hour had passed. He was leading 2 saddled horses, Pegasus and a bay mare. The mare's saddlecloth bore traces of blood.
She's one of the Elves' horses, isn't she? One of those who crossed the river?
Yes, replied Geralt. His face and voice were changed and unfamiliar. The mare belongs to the Elves, but she will be serving me for the moment. And when I have the chance, I'll exchange her for a horse that knows how to carry a wounded rider, and when its rider falls, remains by him. It's clear this mare wasn't taught to do that.
Are we leaving?
You're leaving, said the Witcher, throwing the poet Pegasus's reins. Farewell, Dandelion. The Dryads will escort you a couple of miles upstream, so you won't fall into the hands of the soldiers from Brugge, who are probably still hanging around on the far bank.
What about you? Are you staying here?
No, I'm not.
You've learned something. From the squirrels. You know something about Ciri, don't you?
Farewell, Dandelion.
Geralt, listen to me.
Listen to what? Shouted the Witcher, before his voice suddenly faltered. I can't leave. I can't just leave her to her fate. She's completely alone. She cannot be left alone, Dandelion. You'll never understand that. No one will ever understand that, but I know. If she remains alone, the same thing will happen to her as once happened to me. You'll never understand that.
I do understand, which is why I'm coming with you. You're insane. Do you know where I'm headed? Yes, I do, Geralt. I haven't told you everything. I feel guilty. I didn't do anything. I didn't know what to do. But now I know. I want to go with you. I want to be by your side. I never told you about Ciri and the rumours that are circulating. I met some acquaintances from Kovir, and they, in turn, had heard the reports of some envoys who had returned from Nilfgaard. I imagine those rumours may even have reached the squirrels' ears. That you've already heard everything from those elves who crossed the ribbon. But let me tell you.
The Witcher stood thinking for a long time, his arms hanging limply at his sides. Get on your horse, he finally said, his voice sounding different. You can tell me on the way. That morning there was an unusual commotion in Lothsgrim Palace, the Imperator's summer residence. All the more unusual since commotions, emotions, or excitement were not at all customary for the Nilfgaardian nobility, and demonstrating anxiety or excitement was regarded as a sign of immaturity. Behaviour of that kind was treated by the Nilfgaardian noblemen as highly reprehensible and contemptible, to such an extent that even callow youths, from whom few would have demanded greater maturity, were expected to refrain from any displays of animation. That morning, though, there were no young men in Lothsgrim. Young men wouldn't have had any reason to be in Lothsgrim. Stern, austere aristocrats, knights and courtiers were filling the palace's enormous throne room, every one of them dressed in ceremonial courtly black, enlivened only by white ruffs and cuffs. The men were accompanied by a small number of equally stern, austere ladies, whom custom permitted to brighten the black of their costume with a little modest jewellery. They all pretended to be dignified, stern, and austere, but they were all extremely excited. They say she's ugly, skinny and ugly, but she allegedly has royal blood. Illegitimate? Not a bit of it. Legitimate. Will she ascend to the throne? Should the Imperator so decide? By thunder, just look at Ardal Ebdai and Count de Vet. Look at their faces, as though they drank vinegar. Be quiet, Your Excellency. Do their expressions surprise you? If the rumors are true, Emir will be giving the ancient houses a slap in the face. He will humiliate them. The rumors won't be true. The Imperator wouldn't wed that foundling. He couldn't possibly. Emir will do whatever he wants. Heed your words, Your Excellency. Be careful what you say. There have been people who have said Emir couldn't do this or that, and they all ended up on the scaffold. They say he has already signed a decree concerning an endowment for her. 300 marks annually. Can you imagine? And the title of princess. Have any of you seen her yet? She was placed under the care of Countess Liedertal on her arrival, and her house was cordoned off by the guard. They have entrusted her to the Countess in order that she may instill some idea of manners in the little chit. They say your princess behaves like a farm girl. What's so strange about that? She comes from the north, from barbaric Sintra. Which makes the rumors about a marriage to Emir all the more unlikely. No, it's utterly beyond the pale. The Imperator is to marry De Vet's youngest daughter as planned. He will not marry that usurper. It is high time he finally married somebody. For the sake of the dynasty, it is high time we had a little archduke. Then let him be wed, but not to that stray. Quiet! Don't gush. I give you my word, noble lords, that marriage will not happen. What purpose could such a match serve? It's politics, Countess. We are waging a war. That bond would have political and strategic significance. The dynasty of which the princess is a member has legal titles and confirmed feudatory rights to the lands on the Lower Yara. Were she to become the Imperator's spouse, it would be an excellent move. Just look over there at King Esterrad's envoys, how they whisper. So, you support this outlandish relationship, Duke, or you've simply been cancelling Emir? Is that it? It's my business, Margrave, what I do or don't support. And I would advise you not to question the Imperator's decisions. Has he already made his decision, then? I doubt it. You are in error, then, to doubt it. What do you mean by that, madam? Emir has sent Baroness Tartan away from the court. He has ordered her to return to her husband. He's broken off with Devla Treifenbräuner? It cannot be. Devla has been his favourite for 3 years. Now she has been expelled from the court. It's true. They say the golden-haired Devla kicked up an awful fuss. 4 royal guardsmen had to manhandle her into the carriage. Her husband will be overjoyed. I doubt that. By the great sun, Emir has broken off with Devla. He's broken off with her for that foundling, for that savage from the north. Quiet, for heaven's sake. Who supports this? Which faction supports this? Be quiet, I said. They're looking at us. That wench, princess, is said to be ugly. When the Imperator sees her, are you trying to say he hasn't seen her yet? He hasn't had time. He only returned from Dan Roach an hour ago. Emir never had a liking for ugly women. Eine Dermot, Clara Ebgudolen-Gore, and Devla Treifenbräuner was a true beauty. Perhaps the foundling will grow pretty with time. After she's been given a good scrubbing, they say princesses from the north seldom wash. Heed your words. You may be speaking about the Imperator's spouse. She is still a child. She is no more than 14. I say again, it would be a political union, purely formal. Were that the case, the golden-haired Devla would remain at court. The foundling from Sintra would politically and formally ascend the throne beside Emir. But in the evening, Emir would give her a tiara and the crown jewels to play with, and would visit Devla's bedchamber. at least until the chit attained an age when she could safely bear him a child.
Yes, you may have something there. What is the name of the princess?
Zirella, or something of the kind.
Not a bit of it. She is called Zirilla. Yes, I think it is Zirilla. A barbarous name.
Be quiet, damn it! And show a little dignity. You're squabbling like unruly children. Heed your words. Be careful that I do not treat them as an affront. If you're demanding satisfaction, you know where to find me, Margrave. Silence! Be quiet! The Imperator! The herald did not have to make a special effort. One blow of his staff on the floor was sufficient for the black-berried heads of the aristocrats and knights to bow down like ears of corn blown in the wind. The silence in the throne room was so complete that the herald did not have to raise his voice especially either. Emir var Emrys daethwen adan in carn eb monrod. The white flame dancing on the barrows of his foes. He marched down the double file of noblemen with his usual brisk step, vigorously waving his right hand. His black costume was identical to that of the courtiers, aside from the lack of a ruff. The Imperator's dark hair, largely unkempt as usual, was kept reasonably neat by a narrow gold band, and the imperial chain of office glistened on his neck. The emir sat down on the throne quite carelessly, placing an elbow on the armrest and his chin in his hand. He did not throw a leg over the other armrest, signifying that etiquette still applied. None of the bowed heads rose by even an inch. The Imperator cleared his throat loudly without changing his position. The courtiers breathed again and straightened up. The herald struck his staff on the floor once again. Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, the Queen of Sintra, the Princess of Brugga and Duchess of Sodden, heiress of Ines Ardskalig and Ines Anskalig, and suzerain of Atre and Abyara. All eyes turned towards the doors, where the tall and dignified Stella Congreve, Countess of Lithertal, was standing. Alongside the Countess walked the holder of all those impressive titles. Skinny, fair-haired, extremely pale, somewhat stooped in a long blue dress. A dress in which she very clearly felt awkward and uncomfortable. Emir Daithwin sat up on his throne, and the courtiers immediately bowed low again. Stella Congreve nudged the fair-haired girl very gently, and the two of them filed between the double row of bowing aristocrats, all members of the leading houses of Nilfgaard. The girl walked stiffly and hesitantly. She'll stumble, thought the Countess. Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon stumbled. Ugly, scrawny little thing, thought the Countess as she neared the throne. Clumsy, and what's more, rather bovine. But I shall make her a beauty. I shall make her a queen, Emir, just as you ordered. The white flame of Nilfgaard watched them from his position on the throne. As usual, his eyes were somewhat narrowed, and the hint of a sneer played on his lips. The Queen of Sintra stumbled a second time. The Imperator placed an elbow on the armrest of the throne and touched his cheek with his hand. He was smiling. Stella Congreve was close enough to recognize that smile. She froze in horror. Something is not right, she thought. Something is not right. Heads will fall. By the great sun, heads will fall. She regained her presence of mind and curtsied, making the girl follow suit. Emir var Emrys did not rise from the throne, but he bowed his head slightly. The courtiers held their breath. Your Majesty, said Emir. The girl cowered. The Imperator was not looking at her. He was looking at the noblemen gathered in the hall. Your Majesty, he repeated, I'm glad to be able to welcome you to my palace and my country. I give you my imperial word that the day is close when all the titles belonging to you will return to you, along with the lands which are your legal inheritance, which legally and incontrovertibly belong to you. The usurpers, who lord it over your estates, have declared war on me. They attacked me, stating that they were defending your just rights. May the entire world know that you are turning to me, not to them, for help. May the entire world know that here in my land you enjoy the reverence and royal name deserving of a queen, while among my enemies you are merely an outcast. May the entire world know that in my country you are safe, while my enemies not only denied you your crown, but even made attempts on your life. The Emperor of Nilfgaard fixed his gaze on the envoys of Esterad Thyssen, the king of Kovir, and on the ambassador of Nirdamir, the king of the Hengfor's League. May the entire world know the truth, and among them also the kings who pretended not to know where rightness and justice lay. And may the entire world know that help will be given to you. Your enemies and mine will be defeated. Peace will reign once again in Sintra, in Sodden and Brugge, in Atre, on the Isles of Skellige and at the mouth of the Yara Delta, and you will ascend the throne to the joy of your countrymen and everyone to whom justice is dear. The girl in the blue dress lowered her head even further. Before that happens, said Emir, you will be treated with the respect due to you by me and by all of my subjects. And since the flame of war still blazes in your kingdom, as evidence of the honor, respect, and friendship of Nilfgaard, I endow you with the title of Duchess of Rouen and Yimlatz, Lady of the Castle of Dan Rouen, where you will now travel, in order to await the arrival of more peaceful, happier times. Stella Congreve struggled to control herself, not allowing even a trace of astonishment to appear on her face. He's not going to keep her with him, she thought, but is sending her to Dan Rouen, to the end of the world, somewhere he never goes. He has no intention of courting this girl. He isn't considering a quick marriage. He doesn't even want to see her. Why, then, has he got rid of Dervla? What is this all about? She recovered and quickly took the princess by the hand. The audience was over. The emperor didn't look at them as they were leaving the hall. The courtiers bowed. Once they had left, Emir var Emrys slung a leg over the armrest of his throne. Sialach, he said, to me. The seneschal stopped in front of the emperor at the distance decreed by etiquette and bowed. Closer, said Emir. Come closer, Sialach. I shall speak quietly, and what I say is meant for your ears only. Your Highness. What else is planned for today? Receiving accrediting letters and granting a formal exequatur to the envoy of King Esterad of Kovir, recited the seneschal rapidly. Appointing viceroys, prefects, and palatines in the new provinces and palatinates. Ratifying the title of Count and appanage of... We shall grant the envoy his exequatur and receive him in a private audience. Postpone the other matters until tomorrow. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Inform the Viscount of Iden and Skellen that immediately after the audience with the ambassador they are to report to the library, in secret. You are also to be there. And bring that celebrated mage of yours, that soothsayer. What was his name? Zarthisius, Your Highness. He lives in a tower outside the city. Where he lives is of no interest to me. Send for him. He is to be brought to my apartments, quietly, with a minimum of fuss, clandestinely. Your Highness, is it wise for that astrologer? That is an order, Siala. Yes, sir. Before 3 hours had passed, all of those summoned were present in the Imperial Library. The summons didn't surprise Vattier de Rido, the Viscount of Iden. Vattier was the chief of military intelligence. Vattier was often summoned by Emir. They were at war, after all. Neither did the summons surprise Stefan Skellen, also known as Tawny Owl, who served the Imperator as coroner and as the authority on special services and operations. Nothing ever surprised Tawny Owl. The third person summoned, however, was astonished to be asked to attend, particularly since the Emperor addressed him first. Master Zarthisius. Your Imperial Highness? I must establish the whereabouts of a certain individual. An individual who has either gone missing, or is being hidden, or is perhaps imprisoned. The sorcerers I previously gave this task to failed me. Will you undertake it?
At what distance is this individual? May this individual be residing?
If I knew that, I wouldn't need your witchcraft.
I beg your forgiveness, your Imperial Highness,
stammered the astrologer.
The point is that great distances hinder astromancy. They practically preclude it. And should this individual be under magical protection, I can try, but—
Keep it brief, master.
I need time, and ingredients for the spells. If the alignment of stars is auspicious, then— Your Imperial Highness, what you request is an exacting task. I need time.
Much more of this, and Emir will order him to be stuck on the spike, thought Tawny Owl, if the wizard doesn't stop jabbering. Master Zarthesius, interrupted the Imperator surprisingly politely, even gently. You will have everything you need at your disposal, including time, within reason.
I shall do everything in my power, declared the astrologer, but I shall only be able to determine the approximate location. I mean the region or radius.
I beg your pardon?
Astromancy, stammered Zarthesius. At great distances, astromancy only permits approximate localizations. Very approximate. With considerable tolerance. With very considerable tolerance. I truly know not whether I will be able—
You will be able, master, drawled the Imperator, and his dark eyes flashed balefully. I am utterly confident in your abilities, and as far as tolerance is concerned, the less is yours, the greater will be mine.
Zarthesius cowered. I must know the precise birth date of this individual, he mumbled, to the hour, if possible. An object which belonged to the individual would also be invaluable.
Hair, said Emir quietly. Would hair suffice?
Oh, said the astrologer, brightening up. Hair? That would expedite things considerably. And if I could also have feces or urine.
Emir's eyes narrowed menacingly, and the wizard cowered and made a low bow.
I humbly apologize, Your Imperial Highness, he grunted. Please forgive me. Of course. Indeed, hair will suffice. Will absolutely suffice. When might I be given it?
It will be supplied to you today, along with the date and hour of birth. I won't keep you any longer, master. Return to your tower and start examining the constellations.
May the great sun keep you ever in its care, Your Imperial—
Yes, you may withdraw. Now for us, thought Tawny Owl. I wonder what's in store for us. Should anyone, said the Imperator slowly, breathe a word of what is about to be said, they will be quartered. Vattier? Yes, Your Highness. How did that princess end up here? Who was involved? She came from the stronghold in Nastrog, said the Chief of Intelligence. She was escorted here by guardsmen commanded by— That's not what I bloody mean. How did that girl end up in Nastrog in Verden? Who had her brought to the stronghold? Who is currently the commandant there? Is it the man who sent the report? Godivron something? Godviron Pitcairn, said Vattier the Reader quickly, was of course informed about Ryons and Count Kaia Epsialach's mission. 3 days after the events on the Isle of Thanedd, 2 people showed up in Nastrol. To be precise, one human and the other a half-blood elf. It was they who, citing the names of Ryons and Count Kaia, handed the princess over to Godivron. Aha, said the Imperator, smiling, and Tawny Owl felt a shiver running down his back. Vilgefortz vouched he would capture Cyrilla on Thanedd. Ryans assured me of the same. Kaia Maur Daifrin Epsielach received clear orders in this matter. And so 3 days after the scandal on the island, Cyrilla is brought to Nastrog on the River Yarra, not by Vilgefortz, nor Ryans, nor Kair, but by a human and a half-elf. Did it not occur to Godivron to arrest them? No. Shall he be punished for it, Your Highness? No. Tawny Owl swallowed. Emir was silent, rubbing his forehead, and the huge diamond in his ring shone like a star. A moment later the Imperator looked up. Vattier. Your Highness. Mobilize all your subordinates. Order them to arrest Ryons and Count Kair.
I presume the two of them are residing in territories as yet unoccupied by our forces. You will use Scoia'tael or Queen Enid's elves to achieve that end. Take the two captives to Dan Ruach and subject them to torture.
What information is required, Your Highness? Said Vattier de Rideau, narrowing his eyes and pretending not to notice the paleness on the face of Seneschal Sialach.
None. Later, when they're softened up a little, I shall ask them personally. Skellen.
Yes, sire.
That old fool Zathisius, if that jabbering copromancer manages to determine what I've ordered him to, then you will organize a search for a certain individual in the area he indicates. You will receive a description. It's possible that the astrologer will indicate a region under our control, and then you will mobilize everyone responsible for that region. The entire civilian and military apparatus. It is a matter of the highest priority. Is that understood?
Yes, sire. May I? No, you may not. Sit down and listen, Tawny Owl. Zathisius will probably not come up with anything. The individual I have ordered him to search for is probably in foreign territory and under magical protection. I'd give my head that the individual I'm looking for is in the same place as our good friend, the sorcerer Vilgefortz of Roggeveen, who has mysteriously vanished. That is also why, Skellen, you will assemble and prepare a special unit, which you will personally command. Use the best men you have. They are to be ready for everything, and not superstitious. I mean, not afraid of magic.
Tawny Owl raised his eyebrows.
Your unit, concluded Emir, will be charged with attacking and capturing the hideout of Vilgefortz, former good friend and ally that he was, the whereabouts of which is currently unknown to me, and which is probably quite well camouflaged and defended.
Yes, sire, said Tawny Owl emotionlessly. I presume that the individual being sought whom they will probably find there is not to be harmed.
You presume correctly.
What about Vilgefortz?
He can be—
The Emperor smiled cruelly.
In his case, he ought to be harmed once and for all, terminally harmed. This also applies to any other sorcerers you happen to find in his hideout, without exception.
Yes, sire.
Who is responsible for finding Vilgefortz's hideout? You are, Tawny Owl.
Stefan Skellen and Vattier de Rideau exchanged glances. Emir leaned back in his chair.
Is everything clear? If so, what is it, Sialach?
Your Highness,
whined the seneschal, to whom no one had paid any attention up until that moment.
I beg you for mercy.
There is no mercy for traitors. There is no mercy for those who oppose my will.
Cair, my son.
Your son, said Emir, narrowing his eyes. I don't yet know what your son is guilty of.
I would like to hope that he is only guilty of stupidity and ineptitude, and not of treachery. If that is the case, he will only be beheaded, and not broken on the wheel.
Your Highness, Cair is not a traitor. Cair could not have—
Enough, Sialach, not another word. The guilty will be punished. They attempted to deceive me, and I will not forgive them for that. Vattier, Skellen, in 1 hour report for your signed instructions, orders, and authorizations. You will then set about executing your tasks at once. And one more thing. I trust I do not have to add that the poor girl you saw in the throne room a short while ago is to remain to everyone Cirilla, Queen of Cintra and Duchess of Rowan. To everyone. I order you to treat it as a state secret and a matter of the gravest national importance.
All those present looked at the Imperator in astonishment. Daithwin Adden Yinkarp Iv Morfudd smiled faintly.
Have you not understood? Instead of the real Cirilla of Cintra, I've been sent some kind of dolt. Those traitors probably told themselves that I would not recognize her. But I will know the real Ciri. I would know her at the end of the world, and in the darkness of hell.
The behavior of the unicorn is greatly mystifying. Although exceptionally timid and fearful of people, if it should chance upon a maiden who has not had carnal relations with a man, it will at once run to her, kneel before her, and without any fear whatsoever, lay its head in her lap. It is said that in the dim and distant past there were maidens who made a veritable practice of this. They remained unmarried,
and in abstinence for many years in order to be employed by hunters as a lure for unicorns. It soon transpired, however, that the unicorn only approached youthful maidens, paying absolutely no attention to older ones. Being a wise creature, the unicorn indubitably knows that remaining too long in the state of maidenhood is suspicious and counter to the natural order. Physiologus.